Hello and welcome to Manibil. Um, I left off in the last part, um, in I think was part 6, which is called "When We Die and the Meaning of Life." And but I left, about 1 minute that I didn't. So there might be some brilliant stuff, quote right, in the last minute that I need to deconstruct. So let's just take that 1 minute, and then it should jump automatically into the next part, which is called um, Implications of Analytic Idealism on Everyday Life.
Rightful. So yes, I'm afraid of death, but it's a price I pay with a smile in my face, because what I get with it is my life is meaningful, intrinsically meaningful. It doesn't matter what happens; it's intrinsically meaningful.
So it doesn't matter what happens. So it's just I'm being used and abused by a big mind, right? No need to fight back, and you better not kill yourself, because then you are associating with your maker too soon, and he will probably be angry that you didn't, create enough meta consciousness that he could suck out of you when you are, you're no longer being dissociated. You're basically being euthanized. What's that? By the big mind, right? And then for some reason this creates meaning for him at the same time as it creates anxiety and fear about death. And what he must be fearing must be that the big mind will be angry at him for not being enough of a spy about whatever meta shit that mind is interesting in, right? I mean, you know, when I try to make this kind of, I try to keep my feet on the ground, right? While I'm stretching myself into, cloud castles to take a metaphysical peek at this crazy talk, right? And it's like I'm trying to create a picture that somehow makes sense in my mind, and maybe that is not very good idea actually, right? Because by trying to make sense of it, because it doesn't make sense from the ground floor, right? I am potentially justifying his shit, right? Trying to know, so he might think about creating the dots this way, then I am connecting the dots for him. But he's the one who should connect the dots, right? And if there's some problem somewhere which I'm trying to focus on, that there's argumentative plot holes, right? Something that is invalid jumps and so on, that is, I want to go there, so I guess it's there, kind of thinking, right? Which I've also seen people who criticize my deconstruction, this sort of, yeah, but you have to do this. No, there's nothing I have to do, right? I mean, it's this kind of, I think it's just basically psychology, right? It's the existential angst of some kind, let's just, as a broad term, use that, right? That manifests in a confirmation bias that ends up taking responsibility for your own life away from you. So you can sort of rest in this Christian slave mentality, right? You're a slave to the mind, right? You're a spy for the big mind. You're a spy for God, right? Kicking ass for the Lord. It's, I think that's a reference to an old slasher splatter video, splatter movie by Peter Jackson, where, this priest, or this, he, that's, it's a very, very, very long time since I've seen it, but somebody kicking the head off a zombie or something like this. Yeah, I'm kicking ass for the Lord, right? Something like that. I'm not into that kind of movie, but there was a friend or a colleague I had, like 30 years ago or something, that was into that kind of movie, and I told him, okay, I'm not into that kind of movie, but if there's one movie I should see that is sort of a prime example of the splatter genre, right? Then which one would it be? Then he, suggested this movie that was actually made by Peter Jackson, and I forget what it's called, right? It's something by with a lawnmower or something like that. Completely mental, right? But it had a sense of humor also. That maybe that's the the saving grace, right? But I remember that one. I'm kicking ass for the Lord, so kicking the skull of a zombie or something like that, right? Okay, enough of that.
I no longer struggle with the meaning of existence. I know
How what kind of meaning can you deduce from this? Because what I'm hearing is exactly no meaning, right? You're saying that the big monster out there is doing something, but it's doing something because of a meaning you do not have access to. You don't know why it's doing it, right? I'm not saying here, I'm not sitting here justifying the story, but according to your own presentation, you do not have access to whatever subjectivity is out there, right? So it's like, and if it's pure subjectivity, how can it have any meaning? Because a search for meaning apparently has something to do with meta consciousness, which is your dissociation. So it's very confused. This what I'm hearing is again this I am putting the meaning of my life beyond myself. So I just have to obey the mind, so to say, right? And if something happens, it's not my fault. No, it's not my fault. I don't have to justify anything. I can have all the opinions I want. It's just because the mind wanted me to do that. Something like that, right? Now, this sort of rejection of responsibility for your own wrestling with your life, that pisses me off, right? Because what I see throughout history, when I try to analyze what is actually going on from a sort of psychological level, it is that people are constantly trying to get rid of responsibility for their own life. Everything. It's about getting and controlling other people, right? Getting responsibility away from you, but control mechanism pulled down over all the other people, right? I mean, this doesn't help anyway, right? It only licks the asses of totalitarianism, in my opinion, right? Just obey your masters, right? Because everything is outside from your point. So if you're talking about, society, civilization, government, whatever collective term of some kind you can come up with, it's all outside you. And if it's outside you, you can't know if it's the big mind doing shit to you, so you better obey, right? I have no patience with this, right?
no longer struggle with the fact that I suffer. I do suffer, but I'm not saying, oh, all this suffering is for nothing. Why am I?
Well, this is a communist mindset, right? In my opinion. Now, I'm not saying he's necessarily a communist just because he has this particular mindset, but communists usually have this kind of mindset, right? A good life should be without any kind of negative aspects, you could say, right? And if there are negative aspects, it's probably these capitalists who are responsible for it. So let's fight the capitalists, sort of this kind of, childish, man-child kind of thinking, right? No, everything comes with a cost and a benefit, right? And there might be very little benefit and large costs, or there might be big benefits and small costs. It's usually the other one, right? Usually there's a sort of a direct proportionality between how much you get and how much it costs, right? everything costs what you in a scientific manner would call energy, right? Without going into further discussion what that might be. But there is a cost to anything, right? Everything you want to do has a cost. And the cost might manifest in various different ways, right? You could also say that there might happen something in your life that is out of your control, right? For instance, your body malfunctions in some way or another, right? Like he has tinnitus, and it's just okay. Some people are born with a particular handicap, or and I have empathy for these people, right? I've been lucky that I never had anything sort of chronicle, that I can think of. In later years, I have a very light tinnitus, but it's nothing that inhibits me. I don't think of it very often. It's very, very little, so I'm not suffering from it, right? Otherwise, I'm a bit overweight, and I should lose some pounds, right? And that's something I can do something about, right? That's not a problem, right? That's not life pissing on me, right? That's my own problem. But aside from things like tinnitus and things you can't help it, right? And I'm sorry for people who have these kinds of ailments. It's just it's shit. There's nothing to do about it, right? And sitting down and considering yourself a victim of life is not going to help, right? Because if you are at the same time, if you shut the fuck up and stick to your own, right? Okay, I'm not being bothered by your problems, right? But having a sort of lashing out at that world outside because you feel like this, that, and the other, right? That is inevitably going to fuck with your philosophy. That is going to justify some kind of bullshit in order to make yourself feel good about your weird life, right? And I don't buy that, because your philosophy should be about what you decide to do with your experience, right? How you understand your experience and what you do about it, right? And how to go about doing that. Applying a moral principle, for instance, right? You don't need to sit around talking to the world, right? It's this kind of crusade that I feel that he's on, right? I have seen the light. I have solved the heart problem. I have to tell the world because I have a Jesus, syndrome, right? It's this. And another thing is, when I deconstructed his idealism course on Essentia, he attacked me for copyright infringement via YouTube and told me that if I do not comply with his story or his demands, that he would push the government on me, right? So what is he actually doing here, right? If you have to relate to his philosophy, he's talking to the big mind, or he's talking to some other dissociations that he consider something he can communicate with, right? Otherwise, why would he do it if he's sitting alone in his philosophy? Or he's just full of shit. This is just a story he needs to inflict on people to get them to behave in a certain way in order to crowd control, so he can have less fear of what might happen in the future of his life, right? I don't know, I'm just second guessing here, right? So I also lost a bit of, I had a point I wanted to get across, and I lost my train of thought. Let me get back to...
I'm going through this. No, that's gone. I no longer have meta suffering. I suffer like everybody a lot. But
yes, it was this thing about suffering, right? Everything comes as a cost and a benefit, right? There might not actually be a benefit, because a benefit is subjective, because if I there are people I've used this example before, right? There are people who collect garden dwarfs, right? Gartenzwerge, as it's called in Germany, I think. Gartenzwerge that collect these things, right? I mean, all power to you if that's what floats your boat, right? I wouldn't even want any of them, even if it was handed to me, except if I knew I could find somebody I could sell it to and then get the money instead, right? I wouldn't for the life of me have these things standing anywhere near my everyday life, right? So to me, they're worthless. And I wouldn't, if I spent any energy on acquiring these things, there wouldn't be any benefit for me. But there would be some suffering, which is all the time and energy I need to get there and pay money and work to get the money to pay for this dwarf that creates no benefit from me, right? So that's why I'm not doing it, because there's no benefit. But that's why you need rationalization. You have to have a very good sense of cost versus benefit, right? And when people come and say, we have some laws, these laws are always made from a cost-benefit point of view, because that's how human beings work. Laws are there to force you into a relationship that have a higher cost for the most people with a lower benefit, so that those who make the laws can have a very high benefit, a very low cost, right? And those they have to buy off to keep this system going. That's why communism doesn't work, because basically those who are ruling you, they are squandering all the benefits, right? Making everybody poor, except the very few at the top who have everything, right? And how do I know whether or not an interaction, if there's somebody else involved in this creation of benefits, how do I know if it's a benefit for me? Well, only I know if it's a benefit for me. So nobody should tell me whether or not I should interact with somebody else, right? If I'm forced to interact with somebody else, it's as good as certain that I am not benefiting enough compared to the shit I have to pay for it, right? Because if I'm forced to it, it's the same as saying I wouldn't do it on my own accord. And that's because the cost-benefit analysis is not in my favor. So I'm not interacting. And then the government comes and says, you have to fucking interact, right? And because you're forced to interact, I have to take 10%, 20% taxes off it, right? Well, fuck you, government, right? The only way you know that something is beneficial for you is that you analyze it and rationalize it. And if there's somebody else involved in that creation of value for you, then the only way anyone can know whether or not that transaction is beneficial for both parts is if they agree, both of them, to make the interaction. None of them should be forced to interact, right? Because if they're forced to interact, at least one of them is going to be on the losing end, right? Because if I don't want to trade with somebody, it's because I don't feel that the cost and benefit is good enough for me. And nobody can tell me what should be valuable for me. That's up to me. I don't want the fucking garden dwarfs, right? But government come and say, you have to have 4 garden dwarfs every month, right? I don't want your fucking garden dwarfs. I don't want your, abortions and aircraft carriers and nuclear bombs and, pride flags and all this shit, right? I don't want any of it. Get it out of my face, right? I don't want the garden dwarfs. Because it's not beneficial for me. And that's my fucking job to decide whether or not I find something beneficial, right? It's not suffering that something that I want comes with a price. That's how things work, right? And I'm not suffering because I'm going to work, right? It's only to the extent that somebody else is forcing me into a system where I might have to work and, pay taxes, for instance, right? That makes it a shitty deal. I can fucking decide for myself whether or not I want to hand over my money to somebody else. I can figure that out very fine for myself, right? And don't come and tell me that somebody else calling themselves politicians can tell me you're not virtuous enough. So I have to steal half of your money because I'm Mr. and Mrs. Virtue who can hand out your money in a virtuous way to somebody else. Give me a fucking break, man, right? What kind of people do you usually see in government, right? I mean, do I even have to say it? They're sick fucking psychopaths, man, right? Without any empathy. They're just pouring honey into your ear and make you think that they're fucking virtuous, right?
No meta-suffering, no self-imposed suffering associated with questions of meaning and sense. All of that, all of those doubts.
Okay, so you have meaning with your life, right? Good for you. Now, go back to your fucking, office and sit there and be satisfied with yourself, right? You came up with this story to cushion your pathetic life, right? Why do you have to inflict your need for meaning on somebody else, right? Because I don't see any coherent philosophy backing this up, right? Now you could say this is just a light course that is not, deeply explained, but I don't think that necessarily that philosophy has to be, 10 books and 20-hour-long courses in order to describe shit. It's just more cumbersome way of describing something that is dysfunctional, right? If you can't describe your complete philosophy within an hour, I don't buy that philosophy very, very well. It might depend on whether or not you're a fast talker or slow talker, or, whatever, right? And your approach and so on. But it's like, why does it have to be so cumbersome? Why are you leaving some plot holes here, there, and everywhere? Might that not point in the direction that is actually not very good, this philosophy? And if somebody criticizing you, you're just saying, yeah, but this is not the full course. This is not the full story. I have written books and so on, right? Which I hear every time I ask question about somebody's philosophy. But it's not the whole thing. No, the books, the articles, and it's just the other day I asked somebody on Twitter, somebody making these, square cut statements about whole of human existence and, something like that, right? And they said, would you mind define this, that, and the other term in your statement? And they said, no, I don't want to define, I don't need to define anything. You can go and read my books, sort of, right? It's this, yeah, you can make these huge statements, right, that people might choke on or something like that, or make digest somewhat. But when anybody tries to scrutinize you, you just say, yeah, you can go and look in the phone book, right? Yeah, I'm probably in the phone book, so, go and look for yourself. I don't need to do anything here, right?
Gone for me. I live in a world that is rich and envelops me in the warm hug of meaning and sense. And I rather live like...
The warm hug? Oh, man. I mean, oh, my fucking God, man. This guy needs a shrink. He doesn't need a platform to do philosophy, right? This guy is mentally unstable, I would say, right? He is in Crazyville. And he's yelling from Crazyville that he's solved all the world's problems and so on, right? I encourage you to be very, very critical about this, right? Very. And I encourage you to be it always. But somebody who has this level of dysfunction in his philosophy, at the same time as seeming so confident that he's solved the world's problems, right? It's like, I don't buy that. I don't buy this megalomania, right? This combination of craziness and megalomania is probably one of the most dangerous ones, right? Because you can always sit there and say, yeah, but it's just the mind out, it's the big mind. Well, what is the big, yeah, maybe it's outside your experiences. Well, I can experience it then. No, you can't experience, but you can take some logical, mental leaps to get there, right? So you can always get away from anything because you're the one out there in reality, potentially adapting this craziness to your everyday life. So you're responsible. You are responsible for making that leap rather than him. He's not telling you basically anything directly about your everyday. He's just coming up with this weird story that you might then go and implement, right? And then you could say, well, that's your problem. I didn't tell you to do it, right? So you made that last leap back to reality. Now, there is the next step here is going to take. Let's see how far he can get back into reality from this crazy talk, right? So,
like this, with the fear of death, then live an unexamined life of platitudes without fear of death?
Oh my God, it's annoying.
Our worldviews are like our operating system to go through life. A change in a worldview changes everything, changes every aspect of life. It has a bearing everywhere. So a transition from materialism to idealism has...
A transition? It almost sounds like these sad, LGBT sexual transition from male to female, and they're making these incisions in their body to create a. I am also triggered about how young people are being destroyed by mainstream media and government and propaganda and feminism, and it's a sad story, right? At this point. One of the benefits of being a skeptical person is that you will always have to trust your own philosophy, right? And at the same time, you're very careful not to inflict your philosophy on somebody else, right? Or at least, that's my approach, right? I always, whenever I say something, it's sort of the caveat that this is my approach, right? I'm not saying this is how everybody should do it, right? And often people hear it as that. Anybody making any statement, that is an incentive to change everybody else. My point is, no, my philosophy is my philosophy. You don't have to do anything that is remotely in connection with what I do or I say or how I think, right? But my point is just that, well, if you are sort of only have some kind of half-baked philosophy, and I have come up with something that I find to be pretty decent, right? You might be inspired by it and follow down that avenue, or however you want to put it, right? It's not, this is the solution, obey your masters kind of thing, right? That he's approaching here. I have figured out there is a big mind out there who wants to suck subjectivity out of you, right? When you're done spying. Philosophy, as most people seem to understand it, is I have to go and tell people how it is. No. What you can do is you can tell people how you do it, right? I'm doing it this way. If you like it and think there's something to go with it, right? If you want. But you have to be the judge whether or not it's good philosophy. I can tell you if it's good philosophy. It works for me. But that doesn't mean it must work for you, right? You might be completely different from me. This is what works for me. And the problem is that it takes a huge fucking backbone to say that, right? Because you have to stand your ground with your own philosophy. And I think that if you want to inflict your philosophy on somebody else, you need to, it's an implicit notion that you have to rally somebody else behind your philosophy because it isn't really that good. but you have to convince people that it's good. So you can always say, well, all these people believe in me, so it must be a good philosophy, right? It's the sophist approach to philosophy rather than saying, this is what I have come up with. This works for me. There might be some gray areas where it might be improved here, there, and everywhere, right? But maybe not everywhere, to paraphrase the Beatles. But I think I'm on the right track with my philosophy, right? And I'm extending and saying, well, maybe there's something for you. I mean, I would like somebody to present their philosophy and argue well for it, because if you're presenting something where the dots aren't connected sufficiently, I have to think that you're not good at philosophy, and if you're not good at philosophy, why would I take it seriously? I want something that fucking works, right? That is based on steps A, B, C, D, and E, and so on, that are connected in a rigid manner. You can't just bring in shit whenever you want it, right? And say, I created something, right? That doesn't work. Because philosophy deals with all of your experience, so you can't add anything to it that is beyond your experience, because you're trying to describe your experience. And he is doing the same thing. He's just stepping out of it and saying, now I'm outside my experience and I'm talking about something outside my experience. Well, there can only be some kind of half-ass appeal to prior understandings of abstractions that is just putting beyond his experiences, right? As if abstractions are disconnected from your experiences in this sort of Platonic form approach, right? That the forms are existing in a realm beyond your experiences, right? No, everything you have access to, right? If you're referring to something like a ripple, you are referring to something in your mind, right? That you are able to imagine something outside your mind, like a ripple, doesn't mean that there are ripples outside your mind, right? But because there's nothing there imagined before you start to imagine that there's ripples, then you can put those ripples there all you want, because you're not going to be contradicting anything, because there's nothing there already, right? And that's why it's so, when people step outside their experiences, you have to be freaking careful, because I'm saying you can't do that. You can step out of it, but then there's nothing there you can refer to, because now you're outside everything that you can refer to. So you have to shut the fuck up, stop talking, because all your talk, all your language, all your references have to be to something that is a part of mind. And then you're sort of creating metaphors and saying, yeah, it's not a ripple, but it's like a ripple, right? So it gets this sort of, we are stretching the terms and the understanding and the abstractions to a level where it's useless. And it's only because people want to go there to some kind of safe space, away from their everyday experiences, that they, for some reason, can't handle, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Has a bearing on everything, every aspect of life. So, for example, a topic I already touched upon, the meaning of life. We live in a society in which there is an epidemic of depression, an epidemic of...
An epidemic? It's not an illness, right? So it's not an epidemic, right? It's sort of, it's just, I have caught some depression. It has attacked me, the depression. No, there is a reason why, right? There is depression. Might it have something to do with government, maybe, right? Might it have something to do with that? No, we can't see any problem there, right? No, it's something, you're just attacked by depression. It comes out of nowhere. We can't see any reasons anywhere, right?
Anxiety associated with the...
And to relate back to my cost and benefit, right? When government says something is free, right? it's a load of fucking bullshit, right? It's the same as saying you can have some benefit without any costs, right? Yes, if you're a government and you take something here and give to somebody else here, they get a lot of benefit without any basic cost, right? But somebody is getting the cost. Usually those who are forced to pay, right? And then turning the idea of paying into a bit of a stretch, right? If somebody takes your money, you're not paying them, right? So, government is in the business of creating the idea that you can have benefits without any costs. While at the same time, they're stealing your fucking money, right? They're sticking their hands in your back pocket and then turning around and handing you money, right? They steal $100 and then give you back 80, right? Or give you back 50 or something like that, right? And saying, hey, look, without me, you wouldn't have these $50. Oh, man.
The inability people have to discern meaning in the movements of life, particularly the sufferings that are intrinsic to life. That's changing.
It's very, 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 very pessimistic, right? If you're pessimistic, if you only look at the costs of life, right? And you can't see any benefits, right? Because if a benefit comes with a cost, the only thing I can see is the cost. So you're deeply pessimistic, right? Life should be without costs. I need to have a government that just hands me shit. Universal basic income. No costs, only benefits, right? Yes, that will be enslavement, right? Universal basic income was what slaves had, right? But they had to fucking work. Because when they got their money, when people get their UBI, right? The government will come and say, okay, now you got your money, right? Now you're going to have to do as I say, right? So you will be enslaved. So you need to have this magical land where benefits comes without cost. You will be enslaved by your masters, right? Stupid idiot, man, right? I'm not necessarily talking about Bernardo Kastrup here, but these crazy people thinking you can have something for free without any cost, right? If you don't know who's paying, if you're not sure who's paying, it's probably you, right? Or the bill will arrive at some point. Maybe it looks like you're benefiting now, right? But things may turn around and you will be paying dearly for it, right? When things change.
That changes completely under analytic idealism. We are no longer driven by superficial and ultimately untenable narratives that have to do with external success. We tend to think today that the meaning of life is associated with some form of...
Why is he saying we? How the hell does he know what people are thinking, right? You can. He's talking about how people think about life. He's not talking about what they say necessarily, right? When I'm talking about, people have an idea that they can get something for free. That's the rhetoric I'm hearing, right? I'm basing it on the rhetoric. People are not going around saying, I think the meaning of life is, external stuff. Having a big car or whatever it is he's referring to, right? No. But I do fucking like to have my car, right? Because I need it to get around. It's just the level of development of, the technology of the world. That those who have a car have an incredible benefit according to those who don't have a car, right? And I want the freedom of having a car. That's my fucking decision. I'm not trying to create a meaning out of my fucking car, right? And I'm satisfied with having a used car that, that is not flashy in any fashion, right? I wouldn't mind having a nicer car, a BMW or something like that, but I can't afford that, right? But I'm not saying that my life is. I'm not. I don't think that people believe that. I don't think that people believe that happiness is, a big car, right? Now, the thing about these external power signals, I don't know what term to put on it, is a part of the mating game, right? The more shit you have as a man, the more women you will attract, right? The more dominant you are, and the more shit you have, right? I saw by chance I saw a video of this what's it called, Andrew Tate, who's up in the medias at this point, right? And he had this big fancy car that cost, I don't know how many millions, right? And there was a new hot, young girl that is sort of, extremely beautiful and sitting there on the, passenger seat, right? It's not because of Andrew Tate as a person, right? It's because of the stuff he has acquired and the dominance he's exuding, right? That attracts women. So all this shit is to attract women, right? Women want some others. They want beauty to attract men, right? Because they are not going into that car unless they're beautiful, right? Because all the women that are more beautiful than her are competing for the same seat, right? So you can say, okay, yeah, if I don't have any shit and I'm not dominant, I'm not going to get the puniti, the poontang, right? The vajayjays. Or I have to, marry some cave troll or something like that, right? So if you don't have shit, you will be less likely to find a good, you could say that you could discuss what it means to have a good wife, for instance, right? I might have my ideas, but men who have a lot of shit and are dominant and good looking also, right? They're attracting all the very beautiful women. And there's something alluring about female beauty, at least for men, right? And women are very, very, very focused on their appearances, right? I would say way more than men are. I mean, just look at all the makeup and all the body, modifications and, nail and hair and, it's ridiculous, right? Only to attract men or distancing themselves from other women that they're competing with, right? This game is taking so much energy, so much frustration, and so many, it's, I think that the biggest source of depression is this gender dynamic, or the battle of the sexes, or what you want to call it, right? Which is fueled a lot by government, right? If it was a free market in finding a mate, it would be different from how it is now, where women can get all the divorces they want, right? They can get all the money, they get everything paid for, their education, their children. They are incentivized to destroy their families, right? I'm not saying that justifies that they're doing it, because just because they are incentivized to it doesn't mean they have to do it, right? They have no moral principle to work from, or they don't care about moral principles, right? Because that might end up stating that they're actually immoral. But it's this destruction of it. Basically is about destroying childhoods, I would say, right? Those who are working to control humans are working from the idea, if I destroy their life, they will become dependent on me, right? Nobody wants, in government or anything like that, wants people to be self-sufficient and be able to think for themselves and be philosophical. No, they want to destroy them. So they are dysfunctional and dependent, right? because that will cushion government. There will be all these people who need this, that, and the other. They have been made poor by government and the central banking system to make sure that there is a government you then have to be forced to pay for, right? It's a big story, right? It's about connecting these dots and how things work. While you're sitting there being brainwashed by mainstream media and the politicians in order to have a particular understanding of what is going on, and if there's something not functioning in their life, it's because of men, or it's because of racism, or it's because of whatever they can come up with, right? That diverts attention away from government, right? It's laughable.
Material success.
And I'm sorry if I'm going a bit on rants and tangents here away from Bernardo Kastrup. Maybe I should be a little more, focused on what he's saying here. I'm going on tangents, right? This is my show, right? I'm just being inspired.
Success in achieving influence, achieving control and power, phenomena that are outside our individual minds. That's how we are driven today. And of course, almost inevitably, we fail, particularly when we think we are about to succeed, because when you're chasing ghosts, it's the catching of the ghost when you run.
Oh yeah, when I have a car that I can actually touch and move around in and taste and so on, it's a ghost. But his elaborate mindfuck of a metaphysics, that's tangible apparently then, right? Implicitly from what he's stating here. So it's like he's turning everything on its head. You can't trust your everyday and your ambition and whatever, right? No. That is chasing a ghost. But let me tell you about the story of the big mind that wants to suck everything out of you when you die, right? That's tangible, right? Give me a fucking break.
Run your fingers through the ghost and realize there is nothing there. That is the moment when you lose. It's the moment when you think you're about to succeed.
So if I don't have a car and I work hard to get the money to buy a car, that car is a ghost or what? Because I was chasing that car. I was wanting that car. I need to do something to fucking survive, right? This kind of giving up thing. No, it has to be balanced. You don't need a fucking Rolls Royce to get from A to B, right? But if I don't have a car, I don't fucking have a car, right? The quality of the car is less important than whether or not I have a car, right? But the important step is the invention of the airplane. It's not whether or not it can go from London to New York in 12 hours or 13 hours. That's less important than whether or not there actually is an airplane. In the same sense that I need a car for my everyday life, it's not because I think I'm getting the meaning of life out of my car. But a lot of things will be, I will be more efficient I would reduce the cost of various shit. If I have to walk to work, right? It will be highly cost inefficient for me, right? I'd have to get up at 4 in the morning and then walk for 4 hours, maybe, right? With a bit of luck. And then done working, I have to walk for 4 hours to get home. I have to have a lot of water and a lot of great shoes, and I'm probably destroy my body at my age, right? And so on. I want a fucking car, right? I didn't come up with this fucking system. Right? I fucking hate it when people are talking about things that I can experience directly, that I can choose myself whether or not I want, and I can trade with somebody else. All these everyday thing that I find so fascinating and important. It's just, no, it's ghosts. You're chasing ghosts. And it's also this, he's probably fucking millionaire, right? He has been working for CERN and he has been a CEO or whatever it is, a high-flying dude in a big important company. And he had probably made millions. So he's sitting there on a pile of money like Scrooge McDuck and telling me that shit isn't important. No, it's not important whether you have 10 million or 20 million. But it's fucking important whether or not you have an actual car that can drive you from A to B, right? You're seriously handicapped if you don't have a car. So this thing with it's all ghostly, right? Your movie collection is just ghostly. Your car is just a ghost. No, go and listen to my fancy Crazyville stories about the big mind who wants to suck, your entrails out of you, right?
And to win. And our lives are driven by communities of ghosts today. That being the reason why there are great many rich, successful, famous people are addicted or commit suicide. So that whole thing, that whole dynamics would change. Instead of collecting pairs of shoes, you set out to collect insights. Instead of seeing suffering.
What insight do I need? You just told me how things work. You told me there's a big mind who wants me to spy around for him and create some meta-consciousness and some memories. And then at some point, I don't know when, he's going to, prick me open and suck the shit out of me. And then I will join him as a pure subjectivity. What more do I need? That's your story. What insight? What insight do I need? Oh, so I need to collect insights. Is that what you're saying? It's about it's about being a spy for God. That's your purpose. Go around getting insights, and then he sucks the shit out of you when you're done, right? Fuck off, man.
Suffering as pointless agony, you see suffering as a means to an end, as the thing that will force you to confront the great.
Okay, but it's not a means to my end, right? My suffering is a mean to the big mind's end. That's the part I don't really like. I really don't like, I should say, right? This is where it's not your responsibility. Don't be so concerned about these stupid objects in the real world, right? No. Sit there and get insights so you can store it in your memory so the big mind can suck it out of you when you die, right?
Great questions and evolve as a human being, as a mind, a more mature, wiser mind that will never disappear, that will just eventually be made available to the universe as a whole.
I'm maybe making this sound like a battle of opinions, right? And psychologies and how I want to approach my life and so on. And there might be something to that. But at the end of the day, I'm interested in how to get from A to B in your argumentation, right? He starts out by saying, not by saying, I feel that my life is empty. Now I've come up with a new idea of my life and it works much better for me. I'm more happy and less, whatever, right? No, he starts out by bringing in all sorts of philosophy. That is sort of okay, and now I'm going to tell you how happy I am, right? And he looks, he's a picture of health, right? He's a picture of happiness. He looks like somebody who's deeply depressed, right? In my opinion, almost suicidal, and really needs a shrink. So I will encourage him to go to a fucking shrink. Use some of those millions you made in your company and go get a good shrink instead of sitting here inflicting your bullshit on the world, right? Go do something in the real world. Go do something you can experience. Use your fucking senses, right? Go make something, right? Go be a painter. Go make a movie. Do something that somebody else can experience. I can't live in your fucking cloud castles, right?
Life becomes intrinsically meaningful, whatever happens to you, whether you are, quote, a success or, a, quote, a failure. Both conditions are permeated by meaning, interwoven with meaning. The greatest success of living is the success.
Interwoven with meaning? So because he made a few abstractions from his so-called dashboard analogy of his experiences, all of a sudden he has arrived at where everything is interwoven with meaning. Now, I don't see that, right? No, I can't even deduce it from his argumentation. It's just like he starts to say, well, I guess meaning has arrived now, right? Meaning is a particularly subjective experience, I would say. I create meaning in this. Meaning is not something that is arriving to you, right? You might get some kind of emotional reaction to your own philosophy about these cloud castles that makes you feel, oh, it feels like a safe space, right? It feels nice, mommy. But it's not a meaning, right? It seems like you're equating how does this feel to me, rather than is it a meaning. And also, maybe at the end of the day, I would like some kind of very clear definition of what you mean by meaning, right? What are you referring to? Has the experience or everything has to make sense? What is that meaning? That is just philosophy, in my opinion, right? That's not necessarily meaning. To me, at least, it's more like there is a purpose with all this, but I can't come up with a purpose myself, so I have to create this higher being that is doing something that is purposeful to that being, but I don't understand it because I'm a stupid monkey. Dissociation. So I just have to go along with it, and that's the meaning. So I am the responsibility of creating my own meaning is taken away from me. So now I can relax. It's all just bliss because the big mind knows what it's doing, right?
Success of being able to pay attention, as opposed to the success of becoming the boss or winning the election or scoring the girl or buying the next car. So that alone changes everything, but there are more implications. Healthcare.
Because there's a connection between scoring the girl and having... Do you think if you're a homeless dude, right, who hadn't brushed his teeth for 14 days, lying in the street, that your spouse would be with you, right? No. You have made a lot of money, possibly, right? And you have sort of certain aspects about your person and what you can do for her that she's attracted to, right? So don't give it this bullshit, right? Why don't you sell your car and sell your house, sell your computers, right? Because it doesn't mean anything. Just get rid of it, right? Sit on a park bench and experience life. No, you don't want to do that, right? You want to tell everybody else that they shouldn't be interested in this shit, but you have possibly a decent car, right? I don't think you have a used Citroën C1 as I have, right? You would probably have a BMW or an Opel or some kind of fancy German car or something like that, or maybe a big Toyota or whatever, right? I would think there's plenty of room in it so you can go hiking in the mountains wherever you want with your girlfriend, right?
For instance, under analytic idealism, the body, the whole body, is what our inner mentation looks like. Even those processes in our minds that we cannot explicitly access through introspection because they are beyond the range of metacognition, experiences that we have, but we don't know that we have them. The image of all those experiences is our body. Therefore, physical health ultimately is mental health. And that...
Careful now, right? Careful. So if you're appealing to mental health, right? How do I judge whether you're have a healthy mental life, right? By deconstructing your philosophy, for instance, right? Criticizing your philosophy, isn't that a reflection of your mental health, right? And defining what you mean by mental health, using that philosophy that is dysfunctional, in my opinion. So it's also some kind of circular argument, right? I'm using my mental health to find out if I'm mentally healthy. If I'm not mentally healthy, then that philosophy is not functional to judge whether I'm mentally healthy. Right? And it's sort of these last parts here. He's just sitting, telling you basically what he wants, right? He has left his experiences behind. He's living in his mental palace of fluffy teddy bears and rainbows, right? And he just spouts whatever he wants because he's disconnected. It's just ghost. Don't be concerned about your direct experiences. They're not important. No, my cloud castles, right? And I'm sitting here telling you about how wonderful it is, right?
Doesn't
Okay, I think we'll stop here, right? I passed the 1 hour mark. Damn it! Right? I wanted to stay under 1 hour, but never mind. I think it's a good place to stop here. So please share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment. Consider a donation, links below and also on the board. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.